Hi, my name is Hannah. I am a current psych student, and this is for my Intro to Ethics final project. I have two of my professors with me. Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, I'm Dr. Florkowitz, but people call me Dr. Florky. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology here at Lyon College. I do mostly animal behavior research, and I'm also the chair of the Institutional Review Board, which we'll get into in a little bit more detail later.
I'm Dr. Sonia. I'm also an assistant professor in the psych department, and I teach classes on cognition and reading, and that's what my research focuses on as well.
Okay. Well, I have a little spiel that y'all can hear about my research behind my prompt, which is subjecting human beings to psychological testing ethical? And I'll get into if it is or not. So I did my research on kind of how humans studied behavior in the past. So I wrote about the evidence between the Grecians and using Socratic seminar method of learning and kind of getting into the idea of learning and education and the behavior behind it. Egyptians did dream interpretations. And then the Chinese with the Book of Change. I have not done a lot of research into these topics, but I do know those were some examples that were expressed in my textbooks and then also when I spoke to other professors. Of course, when you get to like the more recent time period, you'll see, I'm going to butcher his name, but Sir Francis Galton?
Yes.
Is that how you say it?
Yes, that's how you say it.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the 19th century, and he studied psychometrics, which I found out was the study of measurements of psychological traits and abilities. Did not know that was a thing, so I learned new. And it was actually my intro textbook. I found it in there, and I was like, oh, I didn't read about him, but cool. And then also, oh gosh, Alfred Binet? Binet? Okay.
Yeah,
Binet in the 20th century and his study on the first intelligence test, which that was the basis for IQ testing. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. I was reading the right thing. Okay. So I also did a little bit of research about the board. So I'm just going to read this because I really can't explain this. So along with, sorry, I just brain farted. So there are federal regulations in place for psychological testing. Title 45 of the Code of Federal Regulations, the CFR, Part 46 is known as the Protection of Human Subjects and is overseen by the Department of Health and Human Services, or the HHS. It describes regulations governing research involving human subjects conducted and supported by the HHS, and they are there to protect the rights and welfare of human subjects participating in said research. They establish requirements for obtaining informed consent, ensuring that risks to participants are minimized and that the potential benefits justify those risks. The regulations mandate the establishment of IRB boards, or institutional review boards, why did I say IRB boards? B is boards. It's like ATM machine.
ATM machine. Hey, it happens.
To review and approve research protocols involving human subjects. Yes. So my last paragraph is talking about psychological tests and ethics boards. Mm-hmm. So it's talking about, psychological testing is overseen also by the American Psychological Association's Committee on Psychological Testing and Assessment and their Committee on Human Research. They monitor current laws about testing in schools and healthcare and setting the standards for testing, addressing proper equipment, investigating cases that may have violated any of these circumstances as well. And there's a bunch of acronyms right now. The APA's CPTA and CHR boards weren't always around, as they were founded in 1937 and 1973, respectively.
There you go.
That's my research paper. Okay, so I have a few questions, starting with, and we know the answer, but does Lyon College have an IRB board?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
We can both confirm.
We have an IRB board. Would y'all like to each explain what an IRB board is?
So the Institutional Review Board, or IRB, essentially oversees all human research that's being conducted here at Lyon College. Every institution has their own IRB, essentially. So for anything being done at Lyon College, or maybe there's a collaborative partnership happening between Lyon, UACCB, for example, or other institutions, it always goes through review at our board to ensure that we're considering all of the ethics and we're ensuring that participants are going to be protected and, there's minimal risk risks associated with participating in these types of studies as much as possible. So the IRB here is comprised of chair, me, as of recently, as of like 2 weeks ago. And then we also have, starting in the fall, we're going to have 18 members of the board who are reviewers of research proposals that are being submitted. And Dr. Sonia is one of those.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
Is that pretty much some of what an IRB board is? You got anything else?
Yeah,
to add?
exactly. I will say, so every university typically has one, but it's not just universities too.
Yes.
It's also hospitals and large companies will also have their own IRB. That's just to like internally review stuff that they're trying to do with research. And then there are also external reviewers where if your institution doesn't have an internal IRB, you can send your proposals out to like a larger organization that can actually review those for ethics and all that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I actually thought of a new question.
Let's go for it.
The reviewers, are they across disciplines at Lion?
Yes. So the goal of an IRB is to have membership across a wide variety of subfields and disciplines. And also there's combinations of people that have affiliation with Lyon College, people that are not affiliated with Lyon College, people that do primarily research with human subjects, and people that don't necessarily do a lot of research with human subjects. So I would fall under that category of I do research with animals,
Right.
non-human animals. So we have a diverse board to ensure that whenever we're getting proposals in, we have expertise that's going to be represented. So let's say, for example, someone wants to do psychological research with human subjects. So Dr. Sonia is a psychologist, so she can kind of speak to some of the ethical considerations of the proposal. But sometimes we get research proposals from political science. So Dr. Brendan Connell, he's on the board. He's able to speak to some of the ethical considerations there. We have people from anthropology, history, nursing, exercise science from pretty much almost every single discipline here on campus, which is pretty cool. So we try to be as diverse as possible. And another important aspect of this, too, is to make sure that we do have some representation when it comes to having faculty and staff who have experience working with vulnerable populations. So we don't get this too frequently, but let's say, for example, you want to do a study for one of your psychology classes with children. So children, they're vulnerable participants, right? They're not 18 years or older. So there's lots of considerations, federally speaking, when it comes to working with children. There's lots of additional paperwork. There's lots of additional considerations. So having Dr. Yantz, for example, and Dr. Campbell from education, they have a lot of experience and expertise working with children. So having them on the board means that when we get those kinds of proposals, they can provide additional insight that maybe, for example, I don't necessarily have that expertise. So
Right.
large and diverse boards are key, essentially, for IRBs.
Okay. And like when I think of like a ethics board about research, and in terms of like human subjects, I would think of people who do study like, our nursing, our bio, our education. Do you also have like history and
We do have history now.
Okay,
Yes,
very
we do have
cool.
history. Dr. Kieran O'Keefe, he currently is training to be on the board starting in the fall. Because, again, the idea is that you're going to get people from different disciplines that have different perspectives, right? So we have people from mathematics, right, that aren't necessarily doing research with human subjects, but they're very interested in the process and they want to help. Because
Right.
without an IRB, we cannot do research with human subjects here on campus. So it's critical
Right.
because there are very few people that just focus exclusively on animals. That's
Right.
like Dr. Jones, Dr. Olivier, and I, essentially. But most people do some kind of research with humans. So having an IRB board here is crucial for that process and ensuring that we're thinking of everything when it comes to ethical considerations and minimizing risk is really key.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Yeah, I like that. I like the idea of having a diverse board across disciplines, because we also have like a diverse amount of students on campus. Like we have history students who do research, and we have like poli-sci students who do research, as well as our
Yes.
bios and our psychology students. And like, I mean, I haven't heard of any music students doing research, but maybe they want to do research. So it would be good to have a diverse board to have that representation in research.
Because research takes on many different forms, right? Like, I mean, here in psychology, we do a lot of experimental paradigms, right?
Right.
Where we ask people to come into the lab, we're giving them questionnaire surveys or cognitive tasks, for example. But, in anthropology, ethnographic research, right? You're going to different locations, you're asking open-ended questions, you're doing structured and unstructured interviews. and then political science, mathematics. It looks different for every field. So having that diverse board ensures that we're able to account for the different forms in which research might take here on campus.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I have a question for you.
Okay.
And it's a bit of a lengthy one. It's not really a question, it's actually a statement. Would you like to run me through the process of what it looks like to review one of these research proposals?
Sure, absolutely. So we have a structure here for what our proposals look like. There's a document that outlines like how you need to write it. There's different sections. And so when we get our proposals, usually it's in the form of like this document where people have written out everything that we need to know about their study, particularly about the method. So they talk about like how they're planning on collecting data, how they're going to be like interacting with the participants while they're collecting data, and any kind of ethical concerns that might come along with that, like how they're protecting the data so that it's secure and anonymous, and how they're dealing with any potential like issues with asking participants sensitive questions, that kind of stuff. So we get this kind of document that is a write-up of everything we need to know about the project, and the ethical aspects of it. Then we typically, each reviewer will like read through that project, and read through any materials, the consent form, and give a recommendation. And usually the recommendation is either like we just approve it. It could be we approve it with revisions. So we're like okay with the project, but it needs to make some changes before it actually goes into play. Or it could be, we don't approve it because there's some sort of major ethical issue.
Right.
And so we give our recommendation usually to the chair, although this process is changing a little bit next year. So it used to be that all of this would happen through email, where we'd get the proposals, read through them, and then send our recommendation through email. Starting next year, we're actually going to be meeting in person as an IRB. And so we're going to be making those decisions by vote in an in-person meeting.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, like fancier. I have like a council.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So with those meetings, because so I'm involved with our honor council on campus, and we meet and do hearings, and we talk about cases and all that. So would it be kind of like that, where y'all get a case and then y'all discuss it, and maybe the people whose discipline it impacts, y'all discuss it, and then everybody kind of like discusses it in a whole, and like they kind of give their word into it?
Yeah, exactly. It would be more of like a official like voting council process.
How often would you say that y'all send proposals back with recommendations of revisions?
I can talk from my side. I've reviewed a few proposals this semester, and I think the majority of proposals, I think it's about 50-50, whether I say just like approve outright or approve with revisions. For the most part, the studies that we are doing here at Lyon are generally pretty harmless. They're, like surveys and stuff like that. It's not super invasive.
Right.
We're not doing like biomedical procedures or anything.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is just like, a lot of the recommendations I give are like approve with like minor revisions. There's just like maybe something that the researcher left out or something that they didn't consider that I think they should consider. And that's usually like, I'd say like 50% is just straight up approve, 50% is approve with revisions.
Okay. And revisions would just be like, oh, we think that maybe this question on your survey might need to be adjusted, or like what would a revision look like?
So the ethics board, for the IRB, we're really, really focused on the ethics of the project, not necessarily the methodology. So we're not looking to see whether like the project is well designed in terms of the methods. Although sometimes I I can't help myself. I write little comments about like, oh, maybe you should adjust this question, or there's a typo here.
Right.
But we're primarily looking at it through an ethical lens, which is we're focusing on, are the participants being protected? Is there anything being done to the participants or being asked that is unreasonable or potentially harmful? And what are the protections that are being put in place in terms of keeping the data secure, making sure participants remain anonymous, making sure they're informed about their rights in the study. So it's mostly that kind of stuff. So in terms of revisions, like I've had things like, oh, you should probably include this on your consent form, or you're asking some pretty sensitive questions here. You probably want to provide the participants with some sort of resources, like maybe giving them links to like counseling services or someone they can talk to if they find the questions distressing.
Right.
So it's mostly stuff like that.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
That answers like a lot of my questions, actually. Oh no.
Oh no.
That might be a good thing, though.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do a fun one. So, what do you enjoy most about being now the chair? Which, congrats, I didn't say that.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What do you like most about becoming the chair on an IRB?
Yeah. So I recognize it's probably weird being the animal lady, being the IRB chair.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, wait, what? But one of the primary reasons why I came to Lyon College is to teach students about research. I'm incredibly passionate about research. I have my animal behavior cognition line, which I remember of.
Yeah.
So I love all stages of the research process. And like fun rando fact, one of my first jobs in grad school was helping my PI with IRB applications. So I did a lot for IRB applications. I would contact UCLA's IRB office, and I got a lot of information about that process. And I actually kind of like it, right? I know some people, they'll see the paperwork and be like, oh no, but I really like this idea of getting group feedback and thinking of all of the ways in which a research project can become more robust, ethically speaking, thinking about ways in which we can collaborate together. Because being on an IRB, I learned so much from my colleagues about their research and some of the considerations that happen in their field. So I just really love the process, and I loved the fact that I was able to kind of make it my own in some way. Because like Dr. Sonia was saying, when I came onto the board, the process was very different. A lot of the reviews were done online. We had 5 members at the time, and it was great, but it was so nice to be able to come in and have the room to grow this to 18 members, to grow the process. Now we're doing everything on Laserfish, automatic emails, documentation, in-person meetings with the whole round table and everything, right? I just love that community building, and also the fact that, students get to learn from this process, right? Because a lot of the classes, especially upper division classes, like for example, senior thesis, you have to submit for IRB approval before you get to do your final project before you graduate. So this gives an opportunity for students to learn about that process. And if they want to go to grad school, they get that interaction with professors that they can form this close connection with, right? Because so many faculty and staff are on the board now that they can kind of talk to members and get a good sense of what this looks like and how to develop a project that makes sense from an ethical consideration standpoint.
Right.
So yeah, I really love that. I just love everything research related, and I'm really enjoying this process so far in the 2-ish weeks that I've taken over. I've already revamped quite a bit, but I'm really looking forward to the fall and making this something more official. And also we have a website that's coming up soon too. Yes, with free resources. So if you want some resources.
Put that in the video.
Right.
In the description.
Right. Lyon.edu/IRB will be the URL for that. So yeah, looking forward to growing this and making this a really nice community. So I think that's the part I really enjoy about this.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
What do you enjoy about being a reviewer
Yes.
for the IRB? Cut 2 different perspectives.
Yeah.
Well, I think, first of all, I think I kind of have a little bit of a responsibility to be a reviewer because I do submit proposals to the IRB. So it kind of feels like, if I'm going to use this process for my own purposes, I might as well give back to it by also reviewing. But I do enjoy reviewing proposals because it's nice to see what other people are doing on campus, like what kind of research they're engaging in. it's nice to be able to support students when I can who are doing research, and I also am just a huge nerd for research and ethics and all that stuff. I teach the intermediate research methods class here at Lyon, and so we spend quite a bit of time in that class talking about ethics and IRB, and I just love that stuff.
Okay, very cool. Well, okay, yeah, this question has a you don't have to answer option. So y'all can think about it, but is there anything that you actually don't enjoy about being chair or a reviewer on our IRB? Is there something that you wish, I mean, obviously y'all are changing a lot about it, but is there anything that you wish would change further? You can abstain.
No, I'll answer it. I'm going to read myself now. And this is something that I changed. During COVID-19, a lot of research was paused because it was very difficult to bring participants into the lab due to COVID-19 restrictions. It was difficult to get participants, period, right? Because students are going home, faculty and staff are going home, and just everything changed. We had to uproot our lives and put everything online. So for a couple of years, because of COVID, all of our procedures were online, our conversations were online. And there were many instances where I would be looking, because I started out as a reviewer on Lyon College's IRB board. I did the same thing that you did, IRB board. See, it's fun.
Yeah.
But I started as a reviewer, and especially as someone who does a lot of animal research, right? I had questions, and there were moments where I really wished that I could just sit in person and ask, hey, anthropology professor, this is an anthropology study. Can you tell me more about this, right? And get to connect with people. And I didn't have that necessarily when I joined. So that's why I changed that process to in person, which I know organizing a meeting time we were just talking about this, finding a time for 18 people to meet, that's going to be an obstacle. But I really do think that having that sense of community and that option for discussion and voting is critical. And that's part of the guidelines for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services is when we get a proposal that we reach a quorum and that it's a voting process where someone, essentially brings up to the table, okay, I vote to approve of this proposal. And then there's a discussion, further voting, and then a decision is reached and then brought to the chair, essentially. So I think the switch to in-person will be better for community building and also for the voting process and any questions that come up, because that was something that I kind of struggled with a little bit when I first got started.
Okay.
Yeah.
While the chair is sitting here. No, but it's not about you. It's not about you. I really dislike the training modules that we use here.
That's fair.
I know it's fair. So we we use the free HHS training modules, which are not great because they are they're very broad, and so they spend a lot of time talking about protecting human participants in biomedical research, handling bio matter, and I'm not a biologist, but handling blood samples and stuff like that. And we don't do any of that here, so it's kind of pointless, and it takes 4 to 6 hours to do the training. There is paid trainings that you can get. So the one that I used in graduate school was called CITI training, CITI, and that one is really, really great. And you can pick specific modules that are actually relevant to the types of research that your institution does. Okay. We just don't have the money for it here. Right. That's the biggest issue.
It's very expensive. You have to pay as an institution thousands of dollars every year to maintain that. So HHS is the only way to go in terms of free options, and also options that you don't need to make an account for. You can just go online, start it. Once you complete it, you put in your name and you get your certificate. Okay. So that is a major drawback, unfortunately. So I agree with that one. Also, the cool thing about CITI is that as an animal behaviorist, there were actually modules in terms of how humans interact with wildlife and with captive primates specifically. So I thought that was so cool. But the HHS, it doesn't touch anything animal-human related, essentially. So it's not very useful for my research personally. Right. And because we don't do, Dr. Sonia said, a lot of biomedical stuff, a lot of it is not relevant currently. Now with the dental school that's opening up and the vet school, maybe that becomes more relevant in the future. But for right now, it's not something that we do a lot of. We don't do a lot of poking and prodding here on campus.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah.
Right. Do you think it could possibly be like a goal of our IRB to maybe make a training module and maybe like y'all work together as a discipline?
That sounds like a lot of work.
That's a lot of
I was
work.
about to say that sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, even just getting the website developed and the new paperwork, I don't want to think about how many hours I put into that. I mean, it was, to be clear, it was worth it. It was very satisfying and gratifying for me personally, and it sounds like people like it. But training especially, because you want to make sure that every single federal regulation is being accounted for, that you're thinking about APA guidelines, you're thinking about state level guidelines, and also institutional guidelines as well,
Right.
because Lyon College is a unique place to be working and doing research. So if we were to develop training modules, it would have to be very precise, very accurate, very time intensive. And also we would need some kind of online platform and interface with either Canvas or with MyLion as well, which
Yeah.
tech speaking, I don't know how to do any of that. So
Yeah.
that would probably take a little bit of back and forth. But I think that is a very good goal to have in the future, especially if we want to shape this into something that can be used by most, if not all, faculty and
Right.
staff and students that are doing the type of research that's more common here, more typical.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let me go to my other page. Okay, we'll do this one.
Yeah.
So I had a question that said, if a policy is unjust or unethical or just doesn't fit with how Lyon College does research or anything like that, how would our IRB go about changing it, or can they even change a research policy?
Well, we have to follow all federal regulations,
Okay.
full stop, because we receive federal funding as an institution through grants, scholarships, and other types of funding avenues. So anything that's outlined in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, their guidelines for research with human subjects, we have to follow to a T, full stop,
Okay.
which is why a lot of the paperwork took so long to develop, to make sure that we're citing very specific guidelines when it comes to vulnerable populations, when it comes to managing private data and so forth.
Right.
So we have to be very careful about that. Now, with that being said, when it comes to specific practices regarding, I'm going to give an example here, but like, let's say managing data, private data. So one of the things, and this kind of gets back into one of the like minor revisions we get a lot, is if you're collecting emails from students, staff, and faculty, one of the things that Lyon College does when it comes to generating and giving people emails is it has your first and last name in
Yeah.
it. So now it is identifiable information times two, because not only do you have an email, you have a person's full name in the email. So you have to be very careful with that data, because you want to make sure it's being stored in a safe, secure location, and that no one's going to have access to that other than the PIs and the research personnel listed on the proposal that's being submitted
Right.
for review. So Lyon College, one of the benefits is that we have dual authentication using Duo, which means that in addition to logging in using your email and password, you have to go through that dual authentication system, which is an added layer of protection and security for this kind of data. And that's also the case with our free Google Drive accounts. So oftentimes when it comes to storing data, one of the things that we recommend is that you use that dual authentication system, that you store that kind of sensitive data, whether it's like names, ages, birth dates, hopefully no social security numbers, you know what I mean? But like anything like that that's potentially very sensitive, especially if it's leaked, you want to put that on Google Drive. You want to put that on your account and not just like on a piece of paper on a table with the door open for anyone to come in, right?
Right.
So we can make recommendations based on the specific resources that we have at Lyon College, and that's one of them. We have different lab spaces, right? So for psychology, we have our own research labs. So we have filing cabinets that can be locked. So you can mention those in your proposal if you're doing research in one of those labs. And then a lot of other departments, they have their own unique spaces and own unique security features that go with that. So we can make those kinds of recommendations when it comes to storing data. But when it comes to the end of the day with federal regulations, we have to follow all of that to a T. And the federal regulations, it's not so specific that like we need to add or remove anything that Lyon College is doing. It's usually a little bit more all-encompassing, like this is what a vulnerable population is, and these are the members of a vulnerable population. So pregnant individuals, children, incarcerated individuals, neonates, fetal material, and so forth. Like all of that's pretty standard, right? Biosafety hazards, right? That comes up. That's consistent across the United States. So like it's not super specific. It's not like Lyon College students are,
Okay.
essentially going to kind of fall into a different part or maybe not be covered by those federal regulations. Everyone's covered by them because of the way that they're structured, which is great, right?
Right.
Because if you're going to make safety policies and procedures for research with human subjects, you want to make sure that it applies to a variety of institutions. Like Dr. Sonia was saying, is that not only institutions like colleges and universities, but also, healthcare providers might have their own IRBs. So making sure that it's broad and all-encompassing is actually a positive there. So I don't think, and maybe you can add to this, but I think that pretty much anything specific would be more so a suggestion at the level of like, oh, this is what your department has. This is what you should probably utilize to make sure you're following those federal regulations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with all of that.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
This is like way far back into what you just said, but
Yeah,
you
sure.
said outlined, and I thought you said outlined, and I was like, huh. I was like, okay, funny pun, I guess. And then I was like, oh wait, she said outlined.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah,
We're
no.
trying.
I'm hearing like lion and all these like words, and I'm like,
All right. It's catchy.
it is catchy. Outline. That's funny.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is like a bit of like a broad question, and then I have one more after this, and then we should be good. But it's kind of weird. Do you feel that psychological testing on people is ethical, or is there a group of people that you feel should not be tested on? Period.
Good question. I'm going to start with my human research colleague right over
yeah.
here.
I think that it is ethical if you follow proper procedures, if you follow ethical procedures, which, are constantly being improved. But generally, nowadays, like we're not really doing anything to humans anymore that is particularly harmful. And a lot of the times when we're looking at ethics, we're really thinking about risk versus benefit. So what is the benefit that this research is giving to society, and does that outweigh any potential risks that we're presenting with participants to? So, if we're asking them sensitive questions, or maybe we're asking them to we're trying to like increase their heart rate in some way. There's always going to be a little bit of risk associated with some types of human research, but the benefit that we get from the knowledge that we gain from testing human subjects and collecting data it's super, super important just to the scientific community and to society. Like we need to be asking these questions. We need to be testing them with participants. And so we gotta do some stuff with humans.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's ethical as long as the procedures are followed correctly.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you feel like there's a certain group that maybe should be hands off when we do psychological research?
Well, it does get a little tricky, and I'm not an expert on this, but it does get tricky when we talk about testing on children, because children can't consent. Anyone under the age of 18 cannot give consent to participate in research. Their parents can give consent, and the children can give assent, which is different, which is basically the child saying like, I'm okay with what's happening here. But they can't explicitly give consent for their data and their information to be used, because they don't have, like, especially at younger ages, the kind of cognitive capability to understand what that data even is or what it's being used for. So I think with kids, I don't think it means we shouldn't test on kids. I just think it means we have to be extra careful about the ways that we're testing, the types of testing that we're doing, and making sure that we're protecting children in research. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I had thought about, because like children's psychology is really interesting to me, and like their development, because like their first like 6 years is like super interesting, because they go from this to like tiny humans that have like actual like thought for themselves, and like that's really interesting. But it's so hard to say like, oh, I want to learn about that, because I'm like, I don't want to like subject a child to research, and like I don't want them to do stuff either they don't want to, or they don't fully understand, or just something that might cause them distress. And so is that what like our IRBs are meant to be, to like make sure there's no distress towards the patient?
Yeah,
Or the patient,
absolutely.
okay, subject sounds really bad. We're gonna just say patient.
So we actually mostly say participant nowadays.
Participant?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
it was a P word.
And there was actually a shift because we used to say subject, but then there was this kind of like shift in psychology research world where people were saying, oh, that sounds really harsh. And it makes it sound like we are subjecting them to things.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's this kind of like cultural shift to start using
Participant?
participant.
Yes.
But yeah, with kids and I mean, the thing to think about too is that like there's different types of research with kids. Some research that we do with kids is really fun for them.
Yeah.
So fun.
Like basically just playing games and like doing things that kids would normally do, but observing them while they do it.
Yeah.
And there's very little research nowadays that subjects kids to like harm or distress. But that hasn't always been the case, right? Like historically, there have been a lot of really unethical studies that have been done with kids, specifically because they can't really like talk back or like
Right.
they can't really like express that they don't want to be in the study or, you know, find a lawyer and sue. Like they're a vulnerable population because people can get access to them and research them without following proper ethical procedures. And so it hasn't always been the case, but nowadays there's a lot of protections for children, and it's much less of an issue or concern.
You want to make a comment about anything, or do you agree?
Yeah, sure. No, I agree with all of that. And I mean, like, one of the first studies that I worked on at UCLA with my PI, she did a lot of research with children. And one of the first studies was bringing them into the lab, letting them play with. She had so many different toys for them to play with. And all we were doing was just like inviting them in. They were playing together, and we were watching from the sidelines how they were using gestures to each other, right?
Oh.
So that's it. And they were having a grand old time. And at any point, they could just get up and say, you know what, I want to go home, right? So, I mean, those types of studies, qualitatively speaking, has a different feel compared to some of the studies that have unfortunately been done in the past that were way more evasive. So I think things have greatly improved in that regard. And also, I mean, especially with our current IRB board with 18 members from diverse disciplines, we have many experts who work with children, who understand some of the ethical considerations that come with doing research with children, but also members of other vulnerable populations like low socioeconomic status, right? I really feel that we're in a place where we're able to really critically evaluate these proposals, and that when we do approve of something, it's gone through a very rigorous review. You can't just submit proposals just out of the blue with one sentence.
Right.
The new proposal application that's going to be rolled out on Laserfish, it is very long, right? Not to scare anyone, but it is long and there's lots of questions, and you have to really think about some of the different procedures that you're implementing. So take this for example. One of the common practices that's done in, research is, sometimes getting people to participate in studies, especially with their busy schedules, working 40 hours a week, attending class full time, doing sports and hobbies. It can be kind of difficult, right? So sometimes people use different incentives like, hey, we'll put you in a raffle for a $100 gift card, right? But one of the things you have to think about when you're implementing that, which might seem very harmless from an outside perspective, right? Where you're like, oh yeah, $100 gift card for Amazon, I'm in, right? But now it poses an ethical concern, right? Because what about students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, right? That might put them in a position where they kind of feel inclined to participate because of their life history and their experiences, right? So there's a whole set of questions once you say, yep, I'm going to do financial incentives, that pops up on the form. They have to think critically about, right? So these forms are long, they're extensive, and before you even get to submit a proposal for us to review, you have to go through the 4 to 6 hours of ethics training with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. You have to be knowledgeable and experienced from that learning process about some of the federal, state, and institutional regulations. So it is a very long process, which I know can be intimidating, but all of this is there to ensure that participants are being protected, that researchers are being protected, and that this is a very robust process, and we're doing a lot of critical evaluation every step of the way. And then there's more. Even when I know, right? It's like the paperwork city. Even when you get approval to do your study, right? Now we are implementing interim and final compliance reports. So halfway through the study, like let's say you're doing a year-long study, at the 6-month mark, you have to submit paperwork that shows that you're continuing to uphold those policies and procedures that you outlined in your initial proposal. And then when you're done, you have to submit a final compliance report as well. So this way, we're ensuring every single step of the way there's oversight, but also protection as well. And then even if you want to extend data collection procedures, guess what? You have to submit a renewal form and you have to submit a new interim and final compliance report form, which is everything that the IRB oversees essentially. And again, it seems like a lot of work, but we take this incredibly seriously here at Lyon College. We want to make sure everyone's protected every step of the way, which is why we put a lot of time and effort into the process, and also why we have such a large and diverse board as well.
Right.
So I feel very strongly that what we have right now going is going to be great for the future, and thinking about ways in which we can ensure that whenever you decide, as students, faculty, and staff like tuning in, when you're participating in the study, it's gone through that extensive review and you can feel safe and comfortable about it. And if you don't feel safe or comfortable about it, that you have access to contacts such as myself, such as Provost Grafton, that you can talk to about the study and about the process.
Right. I think that's real. What you said about doing the ethics training, is that each student who participates has to do it?
So not participants, but anyone that's listed as a principal investigator, a co-principal investigator, a research assistant, research staff, or other. If you're on that IRB form as, being involved in some way, shape, or form with conducting the study, you have to do ethics training.
I think that is very fair, and that's really cool, actually.
Yeah, and a lot of faculty, and maybe you can speak to this because you teach the classes for our research sequence, but a lot of faculty, they build that into the syllabus, right? Where usually at the beginning or the middle of the semester, students are required to complete that training. And that honestly helps a lot with doing the IRB paperwork when you're thinking about, how should I be storing my data? The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services training, that kind of outlines some of the recommendations there. So it answers a lot of questions and it sets you up for success in the future.
Okay.
All of our psychology students do that HHS training. They do it in Intro to Research Methods class. And then that follows so they do it there, they learn about ethics, and then in Intermediate Research Methods, they actually conduct their own research projects. And we submit an IRB application as a class. And so that training that they've done in intro directly goes into that application during intermediate. And then some of those students will even go on to do thesis, which is a fully independent research project over the course of one semester.
Very cool.
Which is what you will be in very soon.
I know. I'm very excited. Don't know what I'm going to do it over still. I've got all these ideas up here. Okay. Last question, maybe a fun or less fun question, depending on which one you pick. Is there a famous or infamous research project that has stuck with you? This can be one that you felt was ethically successful or one that you felt was severely ethically unsuccessful.
I don't think we're allowed to talk about the ones that did not pass IRB review, right?
Oh, I was thinking.
You mean like a historical approach? I thought you meant current projects. I'm like, no, I can't talk about that.
Not here.
I have
one.
Talk
about animal ones, so you ask her first.
Yeah, I have human ones. So going back to what we were saying about children in research, there have been tons of unethical studies done with children. One of these is so infamous that it's actually earned the name the Monster Study. This one's a little bit less talked about, although it is sometimes brought up in certain psych classes. Basically, what they did, and again, this is something that could never be done today. What they did was they took a bunch of kids from an orphanage that traditionally, a lot of research on vulnerable populations has been done with individuals who are orphaned or hospitalized and either can't consent or were kind of coerced into being in it. But they took children from an orphanage. They split them into two groups. Some of the kids in both groups had early signs of speech delays or stutters. And some of the kids were developing perfectly normally. But they took these two groups, and with one of the groups, they told the children, don't worry about if you make any mistakes when you're speaking, you'll grow out of your speech delays, you'll be totally fine, just speak with confidence. And then the other group, they told them basically you should never speak unless you're able to do it properly, and you have a stutter and you you have this problem and you're never going to be able to speak well. And yeah, it was bad. And obviously, what they found in the study was that although there wasn't any effects with their like actual speech, like the kids who had stutters still had stutters, the kids who didn't, but there was a huge impact on their self-confidence. So the kids who were told like never speak unless you do it properly, they were not very confident. They didn't want to speak in front of anybody, and it had a huge impact. The main reason why the study was unethical, though, was that they never debriefed the kids, and they never followed up with them to make sure they were okay. So they just they did this study, and then they just put the kids back in the orphanage and let them grow up, thinking that they like had speech problems and should never speak. Yeah. So that one was pretty infamous. I love talking about the history of studies, not because it's like, I mean, it's all bad, but not in like a, this is a like scary story, like fun entertainment way, but more in a like, this is the kind of stuff that people got away with in the past that which is why we have ethical regulations today to prevent stuff like that from happening again.
Right.
But yeah, did you have
an animal one maybe?
Oh, well, just to be clear, animal research at Lyon College, we do have a separate board for that, which is the ICOOC. So we do have an ICOOC here on campus that is run by Dr. Mary Jones. She's the chair of it. I'm a member of the board, and she's awesome. So if you're doing a follow-up, definitely do it with her. She's amazing. Yeah. But from an animal perspective, right, Harlow's monkey studies, right, for example, where like you're taking these baby rhesus macaques from their mothers, you're subjecting them to inhumane treatment and unjustified treatment, right, where you're learning very little about primate behavior in the grand scheme of things. And you're instilling like anxiety, depression, PTSD, which a lot of animals actually can experience. And there's been recent work in modifying the DSM-5 TR diagnostic criteria to work with animals because it's become such a problem.
Right.
So those types of studies really rub me the wrong way, especially when they're proposing using these highly evasive procedures without any justification, right? And the same thing applies to human studies. Whenever you're wanting to do a study where you're going to be asking highly sensitive questions or doing highly sensitive procedures, and you don't have consent forms, you don't have debriefing forms, that is incredibly problematic, which, to plug this resource now, all right, one of the things that we're rolling out starting in the fall is a set of free resources for researchers. So, for example, if you do have a study where you feel that deception, mild deception, is necessary in order to study the phenomena at hand, we're going to have debriefing forms. We're going to have consent forms online, templates that researchers can use to see what are the different ethical considerations that we need to keep in mind regarding these policies and procedures.
Right.
So my favorite type of proposal is the one where they have all of the paperwork solid, ready to go, consent forms, has everything in it, and all of the tools that essentially the HHS requires when you're doing these types of studies, right? So something to keep in mind there essentially is just making sure you're covering your bases. And also, like, you can ask us for help, like, just to put a shout out there, like every time I read one of your proposals, I'm like, this is gold star quality, baby. Like they've been doing some collaborative work with Dr. Miller, and every time I read your proposals, I'm like, this is so good, right?
Oh, well, that one was written by a student. So.
Oh, well then tell the student, like that was fire. It was amazing. So like you can ask people that do this kind of thing like every single day, right? And we are such a collaborative and helpful community that you can reach out to any of the IRB members. You can reach out to me. You can reach out to Provost Grafton for advice and feedback, and we're willing to help you every step of the way to make sure that you're able to do the kind of research that you're interested in, but also keeping in mind the ethical considerations that come along with that.
Right.
So yeah, just reach out, say hi if you need help with anything, I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah. Okay, do y'all have anything y'all want to add or anything y'all want to plug? Maybe your research labs?
Lyon.edu/IRB.
Well, and both of our professors here have research labs.
Oh, yes.
That's true.
You go first.
My lab is, I've been calling it the Cognitive Lab at Lyon, but that might be changing. I don't know. We might be getting a better name and a logo potentially. But I do research on reading and memory processes while people are reading. And I'm always looking for new lab assistants. So
I'm the director of the Animal Behavior and Cognition Lab here at Lyon College. We're 16 plus members strong. I'm always looking for new members. We have a t-shirt, we have a logo, we got stickers, we got a website. It's florky.com/lab. Yeah, we do a lot of animal research at the Little Rock Zoo, and we also do some cat studies every now and then as well.
Oh, yeah,
So
every
the,
now and
the occasional cat plug.
Well,
So yeah.
if y'all are interested in joining these labs, y'all can email them or find them in the Derby Hall. What hall is that?
It's like Derby 10. What's your office number?
Mine's 103.
103 through 107, I think.
Yeah.
Miller's is 109.
Oh,
yeah,
wait. JK.
103 through 109.
Yeah, there we go.
But yeah, thank you for
Yeah.
coming and doing this
you.
with me. And thank you, Jason, for recording it.
Yeah, shout out to Jason.
Shout out to Jason for all his work. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.